At 2:47 a.m. on September 29, 2025, high above Bryansk Oblast, Russia, four 900-pound Neptune missiles tore through the darkness at 560 miles per hour, hugging terrain at just 165 to 200 feet, following a pre-programmed flight path to slip beneath Russian radar, locked onto their prize, the Electro-Detal factory. But this surgical strike wasn't the hard part. The real masterstroke was the 4-month intelligence operation that engineered this precise moment. Their target, the Electro-Detal factory, represented the beating heart of Russia's advanced military production. Every Chimera drone, every Kh-59 missile begins its life with components manufactured within these walls. Russia proclaimed it an impenetrable fortress, positioned over 150 miles from Ukrainian territory. They operated the facility lights blazing through the night, so supremely confident in their layered defensive systems they practically illuminated a target for incoming strikes. What Russian commanders failed to account for was one catastrophic vulnerability: a ghost corridor, a narrow river valley where Earth's natural curvature created a radar blind spot in their billion-dollar defensive grid. And Ukrainian intelligence was watching, waiting, calculating. Hitting the target, however, represents only half the equation. The instant those missiles launched, they triggered an invisible 15-minute countdown, the exact flight time required for a squadron of Russian Su-35 fighters to scramble and transform the Ukrainian launch position into a smoking crater. So the critical question facing Ukrainian military intelligence wasn't simply how to strike an impossible target. It was how to deliver the knockout blow and survive the devastating counterpunch already racing toward them. At 2:29 a.m. near Chernihiv, the silence exploded with two sets of thunderous double booms. From two concealed mobile launchers, 4 Neptune anti-ship missiles vaulted skyward. But this wasn't a methodical one-by-one launch sequence. The missiles fired in a precisely choreographed 4-second salvo. Here's the technical innovation that enabled this rapid deployment. The launch canisters featured advanced thermal insulation, simple yet revolutionary engineering that eliminated cooling wait times between shots. The crew could unleash their complete payload and begin evacuation procedures in under 5 minutes, a critical tactical advantage when enemy retaliation is guaranteed. Once airborne, the missiles immediately dropped to just 200 feet altitude, hugging terrain contours to become electronic phantoms. At that exact moment, 30 miles away, Phase 2 of the operational plan activated. 15 Banshee drones launched from the bed of an ordinary commercial truck. The strategy employed a classic military deception, a two-strike combination engineered to overwhelm enemy sensors and decision-making. The Banshees served as the jab, loud, obvious, designed to monopolize attention. They climbed to 2,000 feet, activating transponders programmed to broadcast F-16 attack squadron signatures across Russian radar displays. Pure bait, practically begging to be engaged and destroyed. While Russian air defense systems focused on this screaming, obvious threat, the real knockout punch, those 4 Neptune missiles, was already racing low and silent beneath the manufactured chaos, completely invisible to enemy detection. The entire operation now hinged on one critical moment of human psychology. Would the operator inside the Russian command bunker take the bait? At 2:34 a.m., inside a fortified Russian command center near Bryansk, an operator's display erupted with a constellation of hostile red icons. 15 enemy contacts moving fast, materializing on scopes exactly where doctrine said they shouldn't appear. The radar signature looked terrifyingly familiar. An F-16 attack squadron. Initial panic transformed into trained procedure. The engagement order was given, and the sky ignited. The Panzer S-1, Russia's frontline air defense guardian, unleashed devastating firepower. 10 surface-to-air missiles screamed skyward, and within 4 brutal minutes, 10 Banshee drones disintegrated into fireballs, tumbling from 2,000 feet like burning autumn leaves. The Russian defensive crew was likely celebrating, convinced they'd just repelled a major NATO-style aerial assault. Or so they believed, but here's the beautiful, brutal mathematics of this exchange, the calculation they hadn't realized yet. They'd just expended 10 multi-million-dollar SAM missiles to destroy 10 drones costing approximately $15,000 each. It's equivalent to paying $1,000 to eliminate a $10 mosquito. Ukraine had just traded disposable scrap metal for Russian gold, and Russian air defense had eagerly paid the premium. The real crisis, however, was what happened next. Convinced they were repelling a massive coordinated assault, Russian commanders didn't stop at downing drones. They escalated dramatically. From an airbase in Bryansk, a flight of Su-35 fighter jets, Russia's most lethal air superiority hunters scrambled into the darkness. Their mission? Locate the source of this attack and obliterate it from existence. The element of surprise had evaporated. The sky now pulsed with Russian radar emissions, and 2 Su-35s traveling at 1,200 miles per hour were screaming toward the last known position of the Ukrainian launch site. The Neptune crew's 5-minute escape window had just collapsed dramatically. At 2:43 a.m., the 4 Neptune missiles, now penetrating deep inside Russian airspace, executed their master stroke. They emitted carefully calibrated low-power radar signals, engineered to blend seamlessly into the Nebo-M system's display as harmless natural clutter, mimicking a flock of migrating birds. It's advanced stealth technology, not concealment but camouflage, hiding in plain sight. Simultaneously, back on Ukrainian soil, the launch crews fought their own desperate race against time. This wasn't Hollywood theatrics with screeching tires and dramatic music. It was disciplined, rehearsed, high-speed military precision. Within 5 minutes of firing, the heavy launchers had shed camouflage netting, pulled onto paved roadways, and transformed into vehicles indistinguishable from commercial trucks rumbling through the pre-dawn darkness, racing toward the safety of underground hardened bunkers. To seal the deception, to slam the door on the hunting Su-35s, a sophisticated decoy system roared to life deep within a nearby forest. It generated the massive, unmistakable thermal signature of a freshly fired missile battery, a glowing infrared beacon screaming, "Here I am," to the inbound Russian fighters. The trap functioned flawlessly. The Russian pilots, hungry for confirmed kills, detected the heat bloom and banked hard toward the decoy position. On the Nebo-M radar display, the operator saw nothing but a harmless rain cloud drifting toward the electro-detail factory. The deception appeared flawless, except a trick this clean felt suspiciously clean. The Russian theater commander, instinct's warning of deception, made a decision that transformed the entire engagement. He ordered ground radar operators to override automated threat assessment protocols and initiate a full-power manual sweep of that sector. Then he deployed his ultimate trump card. A Bereev A-50 AWACS aircraft scrambled into the air, a flying command post equipped with radar powerful enough to look downward, completely eliminating the terrain-hugging advantage the Neptune missiles had exploited. Ukrainian forces had deceived the eyes on the ground. Now they faced an eye in the sky. At 2:45 a.m., the Krasuka 4 electronic warfare systems assault finally landed a significant blow. It didn't merely jam one Neptune's GPS signal. It actively fed false data, convincing the missile's onboard navigation computer it was 1.5 miles off its programmed course. The missile, attempting to correct a phantom positioning error, deviated slightly from the ghost corridor. A tiny mistake, but at supersonic speeds against this caliber of integrated air defense, a tiny mistake becomes fatal. That single deviation was sufficient. High above, the operator inside the Bereev A-50 detected what he'd been hunting, a single anomalous radar return that didn't behave like weather. It was the confirmation Russian command needed. The response was instantaneous and overwhelming. 2 S-400 missiles, 4,000-pound interceptors, leaped from their launchers, accelerating to Mach 5. They weren't merely attempting to intercept the deviant missile. They were painting a trajectory line back to its point of origin. Simultaneously, the 2 Su-35 pilots, realizing they'd been pursuing a thermal ghost, received updated coordinates from the A-50. They broke off their chase of the decoy and rocketed toward the actual search area, now just 10 miles from the Ukrainian crew's original firing position. Suddenly, the entire operation teetered on the edge of catastrophic failure. The missile strike was about to be neutralized. Worse, the launch crew was about to be cornered and annihilated. The fate of the mission and the lives of soldiers on the ground now depended entirely on 3 remaining missiles and 1 desperate pre-planned contingency saved for precisely this moment. At 2:47 a.m., this moment of total crisis was exactly what Ukrainian planners had anticipated. A desperate enemy becomes a predictable enemy. And they'd saved their ace for exactly this scenario. As the Krasuka 4 operators celebrated their electronic kill, the 3 remaining Neptune missiles executed something remarkable. They simply stopped listening. The engineers had designed them with a fatalistic understanding of Russian electronic warfare doctrine. Never trust GPS in contested airspace. With a pre-programmed command, the missiles switched to pure inertial navigation systems. It's the digital equivalent of blindfolding someone who's already memorized every step through a pitch-black room. The missiles no longer needed external reference. They simply needed internal guidance. Trusting their own gyroscopes and accelerometers, they filtered out the Krasuka's electronic deception and locked back onto their original deadly trajectory. But simply ignoring the electronic warfare wasn't sufficient. You must eliminate the threat. That's when the real ghost in the machine revealed itself. 40 miles away, a Ukrainian Special Forces team, concealed in position for days, had been waiting for this exact signal. They launched a Switchblade 600, a 50-pound loitering munition, a stealthy hunter cruising through darkness on a one-way kamikaze mission. It wasn't targeting the missiles or the jets. It was aimed directly at the heart of Russia's electronic defense infrastructure. As the S-400 interceptors raced toward a missile signature that no longer existed at those coordinates, the Switchblade slammed directly into the Krasuka 4's main emitter array. A multi-million-dollar electronic warfare system, the central nervous system of the entire defensive network, was instantly lobotomized by a backpack portable drone. The jamming field that had moments earlier dominated the electromagnetic spectrum simply vanished. With the Krasuka destroyed, the Russian Su-35 pilots were flying partially blind, relying solely on their onboard sensors. And the largest thermal signature illuminating their displays remained the raging decoy fire in the forest. They banked hard, unleashing their air-to-ground payloads on a patch of burning trees, convinced they were avenging the attack. By the time they recognized their mistake, it was far too late. The actual Ukrainian launchers, exploiting the chaos to maximum advantage, were safely rolling into a hardened underground bunker. The electronic warfare system lay destroyed. Air defense missiles had been expended on phantom targets. Fighter jets were deceived into wasting ordnance on a blazing decoy. The Ukrainian crew was secure, and 3 Neptune missiles, now flying completely unopposed, were closing the final miles to their target. At 2:49 a.m., each missile armed with a 330-pound high-explosive warhead actively hunted, locking onto precise WGS-84 coordinates marking the factory's critical infrastructure. The first impact delivered a surgical sledgehammer blow. The warhead punched through 3 feet of reinforced concrete as if it were cardboard, its hardened penetrator tip shattering everything in its path. It struck exactly 15 feet from the primary industrial furnace used to manufacture Chimera drone components. The second and third missiles followed within milliseconds, a devastating 1-2-3 combination that ripped into the facility's operational core. The ground for miles around shuddered from the concussive force. Now, let's examine that explosion sequence because this wasn't merely brute force destruction. It was a masterpiece of applied physics and precision engineering. The critical factor was the fuse mechanism. Each warhead was equipped with a precisely calibrated 0.8-second delay fuse. Why this specific timing? Because the operational objective wasn't merely to breach exterior walls. It was to destroy what was inside. That 0.8-second delay represented the exact time required for the missile to penetrate through reinforced concrete and detonate inside the main production hall where the most sensitive and valuable manufacturing equipment was located, instead of dissipating energy harmlessly into open atmosphere. The blast wave was trapped within the structure. The immense explosive energy with nowhere to escape became a wrecking ball in a china shop. It ricocheted off interior walls, amplifying its own destructive force, transforming the entire building into a pressure cooker of overpressure and shrapnel. The shockwave didn't merely damage steel infrastructure. It obliterated the critical production lines inside. The assembly line for Kh-59 missile components buckled and collapsed. The $20 million Chimera drone furnace, the crown jewel of the facility's advanced manufacturing capability, was instantly transformed into a heap of unrecognizable molten slag. On the ground, controlled chaos erupted. Russian Spetsnaz and FSB units swarmed the perimeter. Rifles pointed outward, not inward. They were enforcing a quarantine of failure, desperately attempting to conceal the scale of the disaster from international observers and domestic populations. The acrid smell of burning electronics saturated the air as emergency sirens wailed, their sound swallowed by the roar of the chemical-fueled inferno. Firefighters could do nothing but watch it burn. The damage was absolute. Over 200 different irreplaceable electronic components, from specialized connectors for Kh-59 missiles to guidance processors for Chimera drones, were now vaporized scrap metal. In the weeks that followed, the true genius of the attack crystallized. This wasn't simply about destroying a building. It was about severing a critical artery in Russia's military-industrial complex. The Electro-Dedal factory was the linchpin, the singular facility that produced the central nervous system components for over 1,500 other Russian defense contractors. The first domino to fall was Electro-Dedal itself. The second was the sprawling supply chain it fed. The third was the Chimera drone assembly line, which ground to an immediate halt. Hundreds of airframes sat idle in warehouses, rendered operationally useless for lack of a single specialized microchip. The fourth domino was the Kh-59 production line, now crippled for a minimum of 6 months. However, the most devastating impact wasn't physical infrastructure damage. It was psychological warfare. The strike shattered the mythology of Russian integrated air defense superiority. In command bunkers across the entire front, paranoia began spreading like wildfire. Suddenly, every rain cloud on a radar display became a potential incoming threat. Commanders delayed critical decisions. Operational briefings grew shorter, more tense. And in that window of hesitation and doubt, Ukraine pressed tactical advantages on 3 additional fronts. Let's examine the final strategic mathematics. 3 Neptune missiles and a handful of cheap decoy drones, an operation costing a fraction of the price of a single modern fighter jet. The return on investment? A multi-million-dollar strategic facility reduced to rubble, a nationwide defense supply chain paralyzed for months, and the strategic confidence of an entire military establishment shattered. And so, with 3 missiles and 1 brilliant, audacious operational plan, Ukraine demonstrated a fundamental truth of modern asymmetric warfare. Victory doesn't belong to the side with the most expensive weapon systems. Victory belongs to the side that deploys them with the most terrifying ingenuity and strategic brilliance. The Electro-Dedal factory strike wasn't just a successful missile attack. It was a masterclass in military deception, electronic warfare, and the devastating effectiveness of precisely applied force against critical infrastructure vulnerabilities in modern military production.